The Locked On Podcast Network presents the NFL Big 3 in 30. The 3 biggest stories in the NFL from our local experts at the Locked On Podcast Network. We bring you the real story, why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 30 minutes. The NFL Big 3 in 30 starts now with the biggest story in the NFL.
Aaron Rodgers bashes the Jets over the way they handled his departure from the team.
You are Locked On Jets, your daily New York Jets podcast.
We're going to begin by talking about the past of the New York Jets because Aaron Rodgers went on the Pat McAfee show yesterday and made news because he had a lot to say about the way the Jets handled his departure. Now, I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about Aaron Rodgers because, he's in the past. And we got to look to the future. That era, which was, if we're being honest, nothing short of a disaster, is over. But this is national news. This is one of the top stories in the NFL on this Friday, and it's the top story around the New York Jets. So I think it is worth discussing because Rodgers had a lot to say about the way the team handled his departure. In particular, a meeting that he had with Aaron Glenn and Darren Muji after the new head coach and new general manager were hired. And the Jets, of course, with their new regime, decided to move on without Aaron Rodgers. Rodgers was complaining. He said that he flew across the country. He said, I figured when I flew across the country on my own dime that there would be some sort of discussion about his future. And that essentially 20 minutes into the meeting, it was over. And they immediately told him that, we're moving on without you. He was not given a chance to state his case. He was not given an opportunity to make an argument for why he should stay. Rodgers said there was not an ample amount of respect for him in that meeting. He also wondered aloud why the Jets would not pick his brain about their future. And there's a lot to unpack here. I don't think anybody out there, maybe you can tell me if I'm wrong. I don't think anybody out there is going to be shedding too many tears for Aaron Rodgers that he flew across the country on his own dime. I mean, that's the way Aaron Rodgers travels across the country is a little bit different from the way you or I travel across the country. And I mean, this is an educated guess, but Aaron Rodgers certainly seems like the type of guy where if they had done it over the phone, one of his complaints was they already made their decision and only took 20 minutes. Why did I have to fly across the country? Why could they have not just done it over the phone? I think as well as I do, if they had done it over the phone, Aaron Rodgers would be complaining, why wouldn't you say it to my face? There's really, I think it's really silly and really petty for Rodgers to get upset over something like that. I would imagine from the Jets' perspective, they wanted to say it to his face, and they addressed with him how he wanted them to announce it. They were trying to be respectful. Rodgers apparently having none of it. I have no idea why Rodgers would think that the Jets would want to pick his brain over anything. When was the last time a team cut a player and then asked for that player's advice? I understand Aaron Rodgers, is a unique case, but, the Jets decided they were moving on without him. I mean, what's Rodgers want them to do? Ask his opinion on, Allen Lazard and then maybe do the Costanza and do the opposite of whatever Rodgers tells them about Lazard. But I think this all, it's kind of clear where this all comes from. And there's a bigger point in all of this. Aaron Rodgers is used to being treated a certain way. And that is with complete deference. And that's not unusual for a player who's had the career Aaron Rodgers has had. He's an immortal player. He's going to the Hall of Fame whenever he retires, 5 years later, he'll be in the Hall of Fame on the first ballot. There's no question about that. One of the greatest quarterbacks to ever play the game. And a guy who was a 4-time MVP, a guy who for over a decade was one of the truly elite passers in the league, a guy who, if he was on your team with a halfway decent supporting cast, you were at the top of the league. You were a contender. And when that happens, your team caters to you a lot. Your team essentially gives you whatever you want. You're never really presented with many situations where you don't get your way, and you're never really presented with many situations where the team's going to do something to make you unhappy. If you look at the way Rodgers handled the end of his tenure in Green Bay, a lot of it came from the fact that they had drafted Jordan Love. He was angry over that. He was angry that, he was not going to be the guy anymore because he'd had such a long and illustrious career in Green Bay. You get used to being the guy. And I think, lots of, I think all the top quarterbacks are like this. I think lots of elite players are like this. It becomes difficult when your play does not justify that degree of deference. And I think that's the point we're at with Aaron Rodgers. And it's true, it's true across sports. I mean, I remember near the end of Derek Jeter's career, and Derek Jeter was an all-time baseball player, all-time great shortstop. He wasn't that good anymore at the end of his career. And there were difficult moments the Yankees had with him. And Derek Jeter is known as one of the great teammates of all time, one of the great players of all time, one of my favorite players of all time personally, because I'm a Yankee fan. But it's indisputable, he was not the easiest guy to deal with during the end of his career, when his play wasn't as good as his reputation was anymore. And with Rodgers, the big argument for bringing him back was that he could be the stopgap quarterback. And the argument was, well, who's going to be a better stopgap quarterback than him? And there were a couple of flaws, I think, behind this logic, and I've argued this extensively. One is that his play really was not very good last year. His play was pretty much at the level of a stopgap quarterback you could get for a far cheaper price. And the other aspect of this was the price. Rodgers came with a $37.5 million price tag if he returns this season. But beyond those things, one of the big problems with bringing Rodgers back is that when you have a guy who has been catered to the extent Aaron Rodgers has been through his career, and not unjustly so, not entirely unjustly so, at least. I mean, he has played at the level where he's earned that degree of deference near the end of your career, when you're just one of the guys, when the focus is not on you. When, if the team drafts a quarterback, you may be benched if they fall out of the race to get the rookie quarterback some snaps. That's not something you can expect an Aaron Rodgers to buy into. And even if he said he was willing to, it wasn't that hard to see him change his mind once the rubber hit the road. And these comments, these show that he was not willing to take a back seat. These comments show that, he still wanted to be treated with a degree of deference. Players across the league get cut without making a big scene. It happens to thousands of players at the end of training camp every year. But not most of those players will never experience the treatment Aaron Rodgers has gotten through most of his career. His teams have overwhelmingly deferred to him. I mean, you saw what happened with the Jets the last 2 years. Jets gave him everything he asked for. Every time that he wanted the Jets to get a player, the Jets got him that player. Whenever the Jets wanted him, wanted a coaching move. Whenever he wanted a coaching move, the Jets made that coaching move. I mean, crazy that Nathaniel Hackett was still the offensive coordinator at the start of the 2024 season. That was in deference to Rodgers. And Aaron Glenn's coming in. Aaron Glenn wants to establish himself as the leader of the team, as any new coach should when he inherits a losing situation. And if Aaron Rodgers was here, it was always going to be about Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers would always want it to be about Aaron Rodgers. And these statements, well, pick your brain. I mean, why would you pick the brain of a player you cut? That makes no sense. I mean, that literally a statement that could not make less sense. But that's that's Aaron Rodgers' mindset. And on some levels, he's earned the right to feel that way because he's had such an illustrious career. But at this point, that's not worth the price of having Aaron Rodgers. And I don't think we would ever be in a situation where Aaron Rodgers would be likely to defer to Aaron Glenn because, look, he's out here publicly complaining about the way he was treated. This is a guy who he hasn't just been treated well by his teams. I mean, outside of like one short stretch in 2021, the media has never criticized him. I mean, I'm not going to go into what happened in 2021 because that was one point where he was criticized. But like outside of that, media has nothing bad to say about him. I mean, look at the way he played last year and look at the media commentary about him as though he's still an elite quarterback. It's just a situation that was never going to work. And these comments, I think, kind of show his mindset and show you why it would never work. Aaron Rodgers is in the past.
Did you know your Fire TV is also an Xbox? Turn any TV into your gaming and entertainment hub with Fire TV Stick 4K devices. No console required. Just grab your paired controller, subscribe, or sign into Xbox Game Pass Ultimate with EA Play included, and you're ready to play. Dive into hundreds of premium titles from EA Sports College Football 25 to Call of Duty Black Ops 6 and Avowed as easily as you stream your favorite shows. It's gaming made simple, and it's all on your Fire TV. Play high-quality Xbox games at a fraction of the cost of a console. Already have a console? A Fire TV Stick 4K device is more affordable and easier to travel with, allowing you to take you or your kids' games wherever you plug in. Head to Amazon.com/Fire TV Locked On to get started. Xbox Game Pass Ultimate subscription and compatible controller required. Available on select devices, including Fire TV Stick 4K, 2nd Gen, Fire TV Stick 4K Max, 1st and 2nd Gen, and Fire TV Cube, 3rd Gen.
Tre'Davious White is back with the Buffalo Bills.
You are Locked On Bills, your daily Buffalo Bills podcast.
Okay, let's start with the big news, which is Tre'Davious White returning to the Buffalo Bills, agreeing to a 1-year deal worth up to $6.8 million. Up to is a very important part of this reporting. I am guessing this deal is loaded with incentives, and I'm guessing this deal has very little guaranteed money. And so we'll see what the real numbers are. I don't think that he signed a 1-year, $6.8 million deal. So let's wait until we get the details before we really react to the financial side of this. But obviously, Tre'Davious White, a familiar name, first-round pick of the Buffalo Bills back in 2017, had an incredible start to his career, one of the premier cornerbacks in all of football. And then, as you know, injuries. 2021 ACL tear, 2023 ruptured his Achilles tendon. And it's just a very unfortunate series of events that took away from what was shaping up to be an outstanding career for Tre'Davious White. And so the Bills released him last offseason with a post-June 1st designation. He winds up signing with the Rams, and he started the first 4 games of 2024 for the Los Angeles Rams, and he struggled. He gave up 4 touchdowns in 4 games. They asked him to play some man coverage and carry some routes vertically down the field. That didn't go well for him. They released him after he started the first 4 games of the season and really played just about every snap. Then he winds up finishing the year with the Baltimore Ravens and actually played a decent amount for that team. He was part of their dime package, which winds up being 30 to 40% of snaps. He had some good moments, including some very impressive coverage reps against George Pickens. So it's nice to see that he not only finished and had a healthy season last year, but there was growth throughout the year and started to look a lot better once he latched on with the Baltimore Ravens. So what do I think about this? Well, I certainly hope this works out. You know, Trey White is such a fun player to root for, outstanding dude, high-level player prior to the injuries. And it is good that he was completely healthy last year. Again, another year removed from the injuries. So you're certainly hoping that not only is everything strong and good to go with his legs, but that he's got a lot of confidence in the athleticism and ability to plant and drive. He's 30 years old now. He turned 30 back in January. So this will be his age 30 season coming up. You're obviously worried a little bit about athletic decline. Surely that's the case. I mean, he's 30 and has had 2 major injuries since 2021. But I would say that he probably, despite that, has more athleticism than what Rasul Douglas offered last season for the Bills. And so, you know, maybe you did get a little bit more athletic opposite of Christian Benford. Now, one thing that's heavy on my mind right now is Trey White a starter or bust? Now, he's got a higher ceiling than Dane Jackson, who is the guy I currently penciled in or previously penciled in as a guy opposite of Christian Benford. He's got a higher ceiling than Dane Jackson. So we talked about how Dane Jackson comes in and helps set the floor opposite of Christian Benford. And I think the floor's been elevated a little bit more with the arrival of Trey White. But here's the deal with Trey White is he doesn't offer a lick of special teams value. And so is he either a starter or bust? Can Trey White not be a starter? Does he help you enough in a reserve role given there's no real special teams upside here? Is this a Kyer Elam situation where he's either a starter or an inactive player? It's tough to be a depth corner and not play special teams. It's kind of a required part of the job. And so that's definitely something that's on my mind. And of course, he'll have to prove that he can be the best option the Bills have across from Christian Benford. And we'll see how that all shakes out. Obviously, there's a lot of time for this to play out between OTAs and camp and preseason. We'll get a feel for where he's at. And if he's the best option, he's the best option, but we'll find out. As far as draft implications go, we certainly talked a ton about the need at corner and drafting a corner early in the draft. I don't really think this changes any of that. You still need a long-term solution across from Christian Benford. And if anything, I think Trey White's arrival puts the Bills in a position to have an increased appetite to maybe take a swing on upside. And there's several players that the Bills could consider at corner, whether it's pick 30, a trade back out of the first round, maybe pick 56, where there's some questions right now, but there's a lot of ceiling. I think about a guy like Savone Revel out of East Carolina coming off of an ACL tear in September. Does this help increase your likelihood of drafting that guy, knowing you want to make sure he's fully healthy? You love the player, you love the ceiling, you love the upside, but you don't want to be in a position where he's got to play right now. Does Trey White's arrival help ease that burden and increase your appetite for Savone Revel? What about a Darian Porter out of Iowa State? All the physical upside you can imagine in a corner in terms of size, athleticism, length, really high-level flashes, just not a lot of experience, right? Only a one-year starter. Do you get more intrigued by the possibility of adding Darian Porter, knowing that you have a Trey White in the building? How about Azareye'h Thomas? Very young player, 20 years old. Flashy. Big-time upside, in my opinion. If you draft him, does this ease the burden for him have to be an early starter? How about Benjamin Morrison out of Notre Dame? He's got his own injury stuff, 2 hip injuries in the last 4 years, plus a shoulder injury, all 3 required surgery. Does this give you an opportunity to make sure he's healthy and ready to go before having to play? So maybe that's kind of the draft implication. It doesn't take away from the need, but maybe it opens your mind to some different prospects that are a little bit more risky, knowing you have Tre'Davious White in the fray. And obviously, Trey White's going to be a major benefit to whoever the Bills draft. It'll be a benefit to the entire roster, right? A-plus dude. Former team captain. I mean, Christian Benford's obviously the guy at corner, but Trey White will be a benefit to him. But ultimately, I think this takes some pressure off from having to not only draft a rookie, but to start a rookie in that spot. Now, if that rookie's the best option, he's the best option. But that'll play itself out. But I certainly think that helps ease the burden a little bit. Again, not taking away from the need, not taking away from the plan, but changes things just a little bit. I was texting with someone in our Locked On Bills subtext community. After Bills news happens, I send out a text to everyone with my initial thoughts when the news broke yesterday. And the guy that I was texting with said something that I thought really summed things up perfectly. He said, "My expectations are low, but my hope is high." I think it's a very reasonable outlook to have on Trey White's return. My expectations are low, but my hope is high. Very interesting. All right, so that's Trey White back in Buffalo. We'll hear from Brandon Beane next week. He's set to speak to the media on Tuesday, so we'll get some more details on the mindset behind the decision to bring Trey White back.
Did you know your Fire TV is also an Xbox? Turn any TV into your gaming and entertainment hub with Fire TV Stick 4K devices. No console required. Just grab your paired controller, subscribe, or sign into Xbox Game Pass Ultimate with EA Play included, and you're ready to play. Dive into hundreds of premium titles from EA Sports College Football 25 to Call of Duty Black Ops 6 and Avowed as easily as you stream your favorite shows. It's gaming made simple, and it's all on your Fire TV. Play high-quality Xbox games at a fraction of the cost of a console. Already have a console? A Fire TV Stick 4K device is more affordable and easier to travel with, allowing you to take you or your kids' games wherever you plug in. Head to Amazon.com/Fire TV Locked On to get started. Xbox Game Pass Ultimate subscription and compatible controller required. Available on select devices, including Fire TV Stick 4K, 2nd Gen, Fire TV Stick 4K Max, 1st and 2nd Gen, and Fire TV Cube, 3rd Gen.
General Manager Joe Ortiz had his final pre-draft press conference.
You are Locked On Chargers, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Chargers.
Well, Daniel, Joe Ortiz's first draft He knocked it out of the park, brought home 4 immediate impact players from the beginning part of the draft and towards the bottom half of the draft. So it's going to be really exciting to see what he's able to do in his second draft. And we're going to talk about some of the things that he covered at the press conference, like what his draft strategies are, doubling down on, the offensive line and how he feels like it's a better unit. And if they had to play right now, they feel like that they could play a game and be competitive. And of course, we're going to talk about what pick we decided to select in the Locked On mock draft. And I think a lot of you will be very happy.
Yeah, we were very happy with how the board fell to us, and we're excited to get the clip to you guys to show you how the experts felt about it too, because we have a lot of great draft people on this network. And the best thing about the Locked On NFL mock draft, the people making those picks know the exact needs of their team because they cover their team every day, which is just kind of an expertise that's hard to find in that kind of setting. But we were hoping we would hear from Joe Ortiz and get to talk about it before we unveil our 7-round 2-show mock draft that we're going to drop to start next week as we get our final mock draft of the season. And it delivered. We heard from Joe Ortiz. We got to hear him talk about all the hot button issues that the Chargers are facing going into this upcoming draft, including the offensive line. And I wanted to start with this because I think there's a lot of ways to look at it, but the reaction that Joe Ortiz had when kind of being questioned about the interior of the offensive line perked my ears up a little bit. So when he was talking about the interior of the offensive line, he basically said, when asked by Daniel Popper about like, hey, how do you feel about that unit? He said, I feel like we got better up until this point. We still have the draft ahead of us, but we got better. That quote's from Eric Smith, and I would agree with that, right? But this is where things got a little testy. Daniel Popper definitely got under his skin a little bit because after that he questioned and said, if you go into the season with Zion at center, Bradley Bozeman at left guard, and obviously Mekhi you picked up in free agency is considered an upgrade, but do you feel like that's enough of an improvement for you guys in the interior based on what happened last season? Do you think you improved enough to not have the disaster to kind of what led to the end of last season, right? Fair question. I love the question. Joe Ortiz says, I thought we were pretty good last season, Pop. 11 wins, right? And you hear Pop say, right, but it's an interesting situation, David, where it's like, Pop's 100% right. Like, if you're just switching 2 guys to 2 positions that aren't their natural position and making one big upgrade in Mekhi Becton, that doesn't feel like enough.
No, yeah, it absolutely does not. And I think the only person that you can feel great about is Mekhi Becton at this point in time with the configuration that they are telling us that they are going to go with, right? Zion Johnson switching to a position in the NFL that he has never played before, at least from what we know, at any point in his football career. So I think it's definitely warranted to be a little apprehensive about how he's going to be able to switch positions and not only be able to switch, but be able to play at a high level, right? Because the person who played center before, Bradley Bozeman, yes, he was out there and, he was available, but the play was probably subpar, right? I think if we're being honest. And we know that one of the biggest things that was exploited throughout the season and magnified in the playoffs was the interior of the offensive line. So I think, for Joe Ortiz, obviously he's going to try to, support the players that he has on his football team while also not trying to give away too much information because it just doesn't benefit him at all to do that. So he has to be as kind of diplomatic as he possibly can.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of what frustrated him about the question is because he is handcuffed, which is why I think he got frustrated. I mean, number one, it doesn't help him at all to tell the rest of the public that the Chargers really need an upgrade at left guard because theoretically a team could trade up ahead of the Chargers to go get a guy they like if they're around the same spot, right? Popper's also asking him to basically say that the guys they just re-signed in the case of, Bradley Bozeman or even in the case of Andre James aren't good enough, which is hard for him to sit up there and say at this point. So I understand. It doesn't help the Chargers to kind of admit that there's, big improvements needed there. You have to hope that they kind of see it because no matter what, at this point, you're either playing 2 guys that really struggled last year as your starting left guard in Bradley Bozeman, who's played the position before, and Trey Pipkins, who hasn't played left guard before, or you're using a guy who's a natural center in Andre James to try to play left guard. And that was something they got into it about a little bit too, because he's like, Andre James never played left guard. Joe Ortiz is saying Andre James has played guard before, or at least they had conversations he'd be comfortable doing it. But flexibility is great. You needed to raise the top end talent of that room. And if 2 of the 3 guys are out there, even in different positions, as the same 3 guys that struggled last season, it's not going to feel like enough. And again, Joe Ortiz shouldn't be really putting that information out there right now too. So I don't think it's time to panic in that regard. But I did think it was interesting when he was talking about free agency. Popper asked him about it, and this is what he said. You got to make you got to make smart decisions, calculated decisions, and try to build your roster as deep as you can going into the draft so you can sit there and say, let the draft come to you and take the best player available. And he said, I think we were able to accomplish that. And I think he's right in a lot of ways, David, because I think going into the draft, there's not one specific position that you say, hey, if they don't take this guy in round 1, their season's tanked. And we know that we went into a couple Tom Telesco drafts feeling that exact way.
Tom Telesco was an expert at painting himself into a corner, making him have to go get a specific position and just hope and pray that the right player was available at that position. And to his credit, or, to how lucky he was, there was a couple of instances that players just fell right into his lap, like Rashawn Slater, like Derwin James, like Asante Samuel Jr., right?
Justin Herbert.
Justin Herbert, obviously one of the biggest examples, but all of those players kind of, fell into his lap. With Joe Ortiz, he did do a great job, I feel like, in free agency, saying, okay, hey, I need to add I need to raise the roof of my tight end room. Tyler Conklin. Got it. Cool. Definitely feel good about that move. Had to improve on the offensive line. You get a legitimate upgrade with Mekhi Becton. That I think we can all feel good about. You need to add somebody on the outside that can take some attention away from Ladd McConkey and has some chemistry with Justin Herbert. Mike Williams, come on back to the Chargers. And that, I think you feel good about the moves that were made. You added some depth on the defensive line. You added some corners, right? So every kind of position group got some love but in free agency. So I feel like he did put himself in a position to be able to see how the draft unfolds and to truly be able to take the best player on his board, knowing that he needs to elevate the talent level on his football team, and he can do that with whichever player he sees fit.
Well, it's a stark difference from the regime prior, but just because what we saw back then was big swings in free agency
and a lot of misses.
Not building the depth. And I think that's one of the big things is just the Chargers built out these contingency plans to where if the draft doesn't fall the way that they want it to, they're not going to be totally screwed at any one position. Like you talked about all the different positions, they spread the wealth out. And as much as we wanted to see them make a big signing, they didn't, but they did handle everything very financially responsibly. And also they ended up building so much depth and backup and contingency plans to where they give themselves the flexibility in the draft they have now. To an extent, right? It still feels like a crop of players or positions that they feel like they should have to get in round 1. And the other part of it is the Poona Ford part of it. And that's what Daniel Popper brought up too. You asked Joe Ortiz about it. He said, hey, we thought we made a competitive offer. And Daniel Popper's take was basically, they probably did, but they probably waited until it was too late because they had the chance before anyone else had a chance to talk to him to get it nailed down. And if they would have given him a good offer to begin with, maybe he doesn't go out there. And I think why that's important today is I don't think we're talking about interior defensive line the same way heading into this draft if they had Poona Ford on the roster.
I guarantee
the next 3
you we're
seasons.
not.
They could still take it, right? You could add strength to strength, but it wouldn't feel like as big of a need as it would right now because you would have had that guy you feel really good in the middle. Maybe you felt like you could complement him later with maybe not a first-round pick, where now it feels like it's very much a realistic possibility in round 1